Good afternoon. My name is Beverly Boyko. I am the director of Louisiana National Guard Museums. Two museums, one at Pineville in central Louisiana, that's a Louisiana Maneuvers and Military Museum, and one at Jackson Barracks, which is the Ansel M. Stroud Museum officially, but we know it affectionately as just the Louisiana National Guard Museum in Jackson Barracks, or the Jackson Barracks Military Museum. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of Jackson Barracks, how it came to be, why it came to be, and go through a series of slides about the background of Jackson Barracks. And then I'm going to delve a little bit into the Pineville Museum and a lot about the Jackson Barracks Museum and the collections that were there and what happened to it during Katrina and what happened after Katrina and where we're at today. So that is the basics of what we're going to talk about after we have some lunch, I think. All right, I'm going to continue the presentation now, but everybody continue to eat lunch and do your thing. Listen to me with one ear and one eye. All right. So we'll just carry on here, see if we can make this work. So this is the museum up in Pineville, the Louisiana Maneuvers and Military Museum. It was built in 1997, and as you can see from the picture on the left, it looks like a World War II era barracks. So while the rest of the U.S. Army was busy tearing down these buildings left, right, and center, we actually built one to look just like it did in 1942. So that museum has been going ever since. These are some of the pictures from the inside. So they focus on the story of the history of Camp Beauregard and the history of central Louisiana, militarily speaking, but primarily the Louisiana maneuvers and the story of Louisiana maneuvers in the build-up to World War II. And it's open Tuesday through Friday, 9 to 5, and you can call ahead if you want, and you can get a wonderful tour. The gentleman in the black shirt there is Richard Moran, and he has been the curator and the pseudo-director. Technically he works for me, but he pretty much runs the whole place, and he can tell you amazing stories about the history of central Louisiana. But primarily what I wanted to talk to you about today is the history of Jackson Barracks and the museum at Jackson Barracks. So we're going to start at the beginning, before the barracks, pre-1718, when Bienville showed up to found the city of New Orleans. So the map on the left is 1684, when LaSalle first came down the river. And I just wanted to point out the little red dots are all the Native American villages that he mapped at the time. So there was a strong presence of Native Americans in the area, and the Choctaw, which is the major tribe of the area, called the New Orleans area Bobancha, which meant land of many tongues. So there was a lot of travel throughway. It wasn't a great place to set up permanent villages because water everywhere, but it was well used, and the tradition of the citizen soldier, which is what the Louisiana National Guard is today, was well established among Native American tribes even at the time. And the picture on the right there is a 1723 map, and the plantation where Jackson Barracks is now was owned by Henri Leblanc at that time. This is, again, before the barracks. This is one of my favorite pictures of the city of New Orleans. We've got Fort St. Charles here on the right with the American flag, and we've got little soldiers along the levee. It's just a really rare depiction of early military presence in Louisiana and New Orleans. And the upper right corner, you can see along the river, along the levee road, those are some of the early barracks locations. And then a little bit later on, barracks, of course, everybody's heard of Barracks Street in the French Quarter, so the barracks were along Barracks Street at that time. This is an incident that happened 1809 that led into the decision to put Jackson Barracks where it is today. This guy on the left is James Wilkinson. Anybody related to James Wilkinson here? Good, because good cuz. So he was the senior U.S. Army officer at the time, General Wilkinson, and he had a new girlfriend in New Orleans who was 30 years his junior. So he was trying to, it may not have been related to that situation. And he also had a friend who owned property down here at English Turn, in the lower center spot. But he decided that he needed to have a U.S. Army encampment in the New Orleans area. So he sent Major Pike there in the upper right-hand corner down with, I think it was 9 companies of soldiers to set up an encampment here at English Turn and drain the land and cut the trees down, and it was very bad. It was wet, damp, a horrible place for soldiers to be. And within 3 months, 127 soldiers were dead from various mosquito-borne illnesses. So he narrowly avoided a court-martial. It was a great catastrophe at the time. He couldn't supply these men even once he got them there. And it was later shown that he actually was a spy working for Spain and selling American information to the Spanish out to the west. And of course, everybody knows the Battle of New Orleans in 1815. The Andrew Jackson, the famous general at the time, proved the point that we really needed to guard the river and then approach from the river. This is the Pentagon Barracks in Baton Rouge. Has anybody been to the Pentagon Barracks? Familiar with that? So this was 1815 that they built the Pentagon Barracks. It's Greek Revival style, which you'll see later on when you see pictures of Jackson Barracks. So it was the inspiration for the design of Jackson Barracks. And this is the 3rd Coastal Defense System. This was 1820s, and by 1836, I think there were 70 of these along the coastline, but huge fortifications, Macomb, Pike, St. Phillips, you've heard of some of these. Really large, fortifications that were intended to defend the whole coastline from naval attack. But they were damp, nasty places again to live. Soldiers would get sick all the time. So the U.S. Army really needed a support garrison, a spot to put soldiers who were sick that they could recover and rest and recuperate. So that was some of the motivation for Jackson Barracks as well. But the thing that really set it over the line was this event, which is a slave uprising, Nat Turner's Rebellion, that happened in Virginia in 1831. And it was the big news of the day. Horrible goings on, and reminded New Orleanians of the 1811 German coast uprising that happened here. So the PR after this event really made people down here feel like we needed to have a military post established. So let's see, this is 1832. Congress appropriates the funds for the construction of the new Army barracks. They started in 1833. 1833 they acquired the land. So the spot right there is marked. They got it from Pierre Carteret, I believe is the gentleman's name, who owned the land at the time Jackson Barracks was established. And then that's obviously a picture of it today. It looks a lot the same. The Army Generals Gaines and Lieutenant Colonel David Twiggs, they wanted to have this location again downriver in the area of the Battle of New Orleans based on the lessons learned from that. Louisiana Governor Andrew Roman and New Orleans Mayor Dennis Pryor saw protection against potential slave revolt as the main purpose, so they wanted to have it in Bayou St. John area. But ultimately the military opinion prevailed, probably because Andrew Jackson was president at the time and may have chimed in on exactly where they were going to put this garrison. So they chose this location where it is today. It's right on the border between Orleans Parish and St. Bernard Parish. So the east wall of Jackson Barracks is the line between Orleans and St. Bernard. This is an early picture of the barracks. And what we believe is the original plan on the right side, 22-year-old Lieutenant Frederick Wilkinson designed it. And he designed it like all the other frontier posts of the time, rectangular in shape with corner towers for defense. The building in the middle here at the front, this is the post headquarters. This is the levee road here. Obviously had trolley cars at one point, streetcars, and the river you can't see below. But all these buildings still remain, with the exception of these three. They had to be sacrificed in 1912 to rebuild the levee. So here's an artist's depiction of how that would have looked from the river. The Adjutant General's headquarters here, everybody approached through the archway, and the Adjutant General lived on the second floor, and the first floor was office space. And then on the right side is the layout. Officers' quarters on each side of the parade field here. And this was the enlisted quarters, later on became officers' quarters. And then service buildings in the back, like the commissary and the jail. There's the headquarters building about 1870, before it was taken down, obviously. I think that is looking towards the river. And here's some of the architecture as it is today, Greek Revival, galleries, columns, symmetrical style, galleries for sleeping outdoors. It was way ahead of its time. It had these drainage cisterns for water and drainage to keep the place high and dry, which was very unusual for an army post at the time. They really didn't take a lot of care of their soldiers. You know, they're supposed to be tough soldiers. But this place was really built with health and welfare of the soldier in mind. It makes it very unique. This is some of the officers' quarters. Lower right corner is the commissary building. They're now all officers' quarters today. This is the back, let's see, northeast tower. This is one of the few remnants of the original wall, 12 feet high. And this was a little bakery in the backside. And these are VIP billeting now. So this is one of the early events that happened at Jackson Barracks. So it was finished in 1835, and it was about this time that the Indian Removal Act had been passed, 1830, and they were moving all of the tribal members out of Florida and the whole Southeast, really. But in our case, the Seminole people primarily were moving from Tampa. They put them on boats here in Tampa across the Gulf to Jackson Barracks. They would stay at Jackson Barracks for a day or a week or so, and then onto steamboats, and then up the river to Little Rock, and then walk from there to Oklahoma Territory. It's known as the Trail of Tears with the Cherokee people. That's the yellow in the north, the northern route. The southern one was known as the Road of Misery by the Muscogee Creek people. And this is relevant to the story of Jackson Barracks because shortly before Hurricane Katrina, in the spring before Hurricane Katrina, a burial was found on the post of a woman with a couple thousand beads around her neck and silver bracelets. So she was identified as a Seminole female. And there's a Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act. It kicks in, and consultation was done with the tribes. Her remains were eventually reinterred where they found her. They did a lot of archaeological work and determined where the cemetery exactly was, and it's now a memorial green space. This is the prison on Jackson Barracks in 1870. The first floor had 3 cells, and the second floor had the sleeping quarters for the soldiers. And this is what it looks like today. Again, officers' quarters. There's a family on the second floor and a family on the first floor. This is the memorial green space I spoke of at its dedication and reinterment of the Seminole woman. And it can be visited today. All this historic garrison area and the cemetery, you can visit just by calling us and making an arrangement. We have to ask permission to go over there, but what we do, take people over there quite often. This is one of the very earliest pictures we have of Jackson Barracks. We don't know the artist or the time period really, but it looks Civil War period or a little bit later. This is the enlisted quarters here, and the river's down beyond the trees at the bottom. Oh, I guess I missed mentioning Grant here. So there he is, Lieutenant Grant in the upper right-hand corner. So he was at Jackson Barracks, stationed at Jackson Barracks. He mentions it in his memoir. We know for sure he was there. He thought it was a pretty nice place. Robert E. Lee, who else? George McClellan, Jeb Stuart, a lot of the famous Civil War generals were stationed at Jackson Barracks during the Mexican War period, just prior to the Civil War. Wrong way. Here we are in 1848, so they expanded the post to the west. This area here was purchased so that they could build a new hospital. This is the hospital, the pharmacy, and we think a surgical room here because there's windows and everything on the second floor, and then there were 4 wards. So the hospital really became the main operations throughout the Mexican-American War, and then through the Civil War and all the activity afterwards. This is called a sally port. It's a door between the original part of the post and what was the hospital area. The little white buildings in the background are now where the hospital used to be. It had giant doors, so it was just a doorway from one side of the post to the other. And at some point after 1848, when they purchased the land on the other side, they took down the whole wall. But they left the sally port as I guess a memento of the wall that used to be. This is during the Civil War period. So the post became Confederate early on, and then back to the U.S. government not too long after that, as the city of New Orleans went from one to the other. And 1866 is when it was renamed Jackson Barracks. It was originally called the New Orleans Barracks, and now it's called Jackson Barracks. So it was named after Andrew Jackson. So we're into the late 19th century, and this is one of my favorite pictures because it shows the interior of one of the buildings. So you can see the barracks set up, the rifles stacked in the middle. There's, I don't know, like a wood stove or kerosene lamps. It's pretty cool. And the Buffalo Soldiers, the 25th Infantry, were established at Jackson Barracks about this time. And they trained a little bit at Jackson Barracks and then went on west, where they became known as the Buffalo Soldiers, and had a great long history of service. But this one I thought was kind of cool because these were serious soldiers. They actually said, "Yep, we'll sign up for this operation." The U.S. Army was testing bicycles as a method of getting around in the West. So they realized it was not going to work very good, so that didn't last. But I found that a cool picture. So here we have the enlisted quarters in the 1870s. That would be where the Buffalo Soldiers stayed. And this is it today. And again, all officers' quarters, top and bottom. This young man was with the 13th Infantry Regiment in 1874, stationed at Jackson Barracks. He's Captain Arthur MacArthur. He went to a Mardi Gras ball in February of 1875 and met Mary Pinckney Hardy. They later married, and he went on to a distinguished military career. Served in the Civil War, Reconstruction duty, Indian Wars, Spanish-American War, and Philippine insurrection. Their third son was Douglas MacArthur. So he became a famous general in World War II. Carnival time, 1880, the crew of Rex began their Lundi Gras procession at Jackson Barracks. This is a little known fact. The commanding U.S. Army officer would receive the King of Carnival with a battalion of infantry and regimental band, and they would proceed by boat to the foot of Canal Street, where wrecks began the rain over festivities. So the upper right is the boat going down there, going towards the French Quarter. Now we're at 1898. We've got a new hospital because that one that was built in the 1840s, the roof leaked from the first day. So it was taken down in the 1890s, and this one was constructed in 1898, and it still exists today. It's now called Huft Hall after Raymond Huft. It's billeting as well. And we have Spanish-American War, that's the Washington Artillery on the right, and Louisiana Light Artillery. There's the Levee Road, some of the early postcard images. Coastal Artillery, 1901. The U.S. Army Artillery Corps was divided into Field Artillery and Coast Artillery, and with this reorganization, 2 companies of Coastal Defense Artillery were stationed at Jackson Barracks through 1916. These 2 buildings exist today, the white ones, this one here and the one on the other. The one in the middle is a state building that was inserted, I believe in the 70s that was built, but the one on the left and the right were 1904 and 1918. And they were cavalry and artillery. They've been headquarters. Now they're a post-headquarter building. They're still there. This is the spring training in 1917. The Cleveland Indians baseball team held spring training in New Orleans and played games here at Jackson Barracks. This is Terrace Speaker and Smokey Joe Wood. They drilled with members of Coast Artillery and their minor league team, the Pelicans. And Speaker led the Indians to the first World Series in 1920. And this is a nice overhead shot of Jackson Barracks, the river down here. There's the original post rectangle, the hospital area, new hospital, and then they just kept building backwards. World War I, very active post, became federalized again. On the bottom is Pershing right here, 1920, reviewing the troops down on the parade field. And then in the 20s, the Louisiana Guard moves in. So we had the 108th Cavalry, the 141st Field Artillery, obviously the Washington Artillery, and the 156th Infantry Regiment. And polo was a big thing because the cavalry soldiers were there, so there were these polo matches every weekend. Some pictures of the polo guys here and the field up there and how it looks today. So there is General Fleming, your namesake, Major General Fleming. He was instrumental in Jackson Barracks still existing today because he made it livable again for soldiers and officers. He had Works Progress Administration projects that renovated all the buildings, put kitchens and baths and garages and things like that on all the historic buildings, constructed big new buildings, a new headquarters building, and built in the lower right all those little cottages, so he doubled the housing on Jackson Barracks and really made it what it is today. So that's the WPA constructed cottages on the upper left. These were all in that area where the hospital had previously existed. Lower right is as they look today, even though they're all replacement buildings. So Hurricane Katrina wiped them out and they built them back exactly how they looked from the WPA era. Not all of them, but most. This is Fleming Hall. It was built during the WPA period. It now is meeting space. It was originally the headquarters building. There was a fire in this building. This is how they found the Seminole woman. They were renovating another building to accommodate staff because of a fire in this building in 2005, and that's when they found the burial of the Seminole woman. So now it is conference space. I believe the Judge Advocate's in there. There's the Hall of Fame for the Louisiana National Guard Portrait Galleries in there. Here we are in World War II. This is Joe Lewis in the upper left corner here, refereeing this boxing match. Again, the white buildings in the background that I pointed out. The top center there are Italian POWs. There was a significant number of them held at Jackson Barracks. They were allowed to go into the French Quarter and visit with any Italian heritage people here today? Yeah, you knew of this story. So relationships developed. There's a book called, I think it's The Italian Prisoner by Speranza, that fictionalizes the story of some of these Italian prisoners that were at Jackson Barracks. It's a really good read. Grab it in your local library, I'm sure. But dances, bands, lots of recreation type activity, a port of embarkation during World War II. Here are some of the Louisiana units that served during World War II. You can find out more about the stories behind these units at the museum. 1950s Jackson Barracks, again just expanding to the north towards the lake, and here you can see all the World War II barracks that filled up the place during that time period. Cold War period, the Guard changes or emphasizes more their disaster response duties. This is Hurricane Betsy, which of course the lower Ninth Ward I think had about 6 feet at that time. So they really started to get good at doing rescues. 1956 is the Hungarian Revolution. So Jackson Barracks housed some of the very first Hungarian people that came to the United States fleeing that situation. One of the first events we had at the museum were descendants, and some of these, actually this woman was still around at the time in 2012, and they did a commemorative event at the museum to honor that event. Air Guard, we have to give a shout out to our airplane guys. Any Air Guard or Air Force here today? Oh, you got one, there you go. The 122nd Bombardment Squadron, Observation Squadron, now it's part of the 159th. They're over at Belle Chase, but we have all their airplanes at the museum. So if you want to come check out some of the early airplanes, we have a Super Sabre. We've got an Eagle. Oh, some great pictures of them. Yes, Kunas Militia, absolutely. Now the Jazz, I believe. There they are at the museum. We've got, I think, 7 planes there right now. This is a fun one. Interview with a Vampire, the first movie with Brad Pitt. This is the movie set from the original movie. All along, they built this whole thing along the levee. This is the parade field and all the buildings on Jackson Barracks. So it was a movie set, and I'm told that it burned to the ground dramatically at the end of the movie. But I don't do vampires, so I've never watched the movie. But it's really cool that they transformed Jackson Barracks to film that and built a wharf and everything. And of course, more recent activity. This is 1990. Operation Desert Storm. There's a 159th MASH unit. Doesn't exist anymore today, but in 1990 they had Mardi Gras. This is their Mardi Gras celebration during their deployment, because you can't shut down Mardi Gras. They got in trouble though, I think. And there's the Washington Artillery in 2004-5 deployment during the Global War on Terror. Hurricane Katrina. Everybody's been through that, so yeah, 20 years this fall. We're planning some events to commemorate some of the activity from that. This is the post a few days after the water started receding. So there was 4 to 6 feet at this part right near the levee, and it was as much as 20 feet deep at the other end. Everybody in the Louisiana National Guard that was on post at the time made it to this building. Because it was 3 stories high, so they made it to that. One fellow had to swim from just about the top part of this slide all the way over to here, and it took him 5 hours to dog paddle across the post with a life jacket and just making his way. Said the current was crazy. So this is some of the disaster response and service in Afghanistan and Iraq. And this is the rebirth of Jackson Barracks in 2006. So they thought about it for a minute. They were maybe going to shut it down because it was so badly damaged. But the powers that be decided that they could be rebuilt. It was a historic place. It's on the National Register of Historic Places. It's one of the only posts of its kind. It really is unique. So they recognized its historic value. And when they built it back with Greek revival. This is a brand new building, but it blends in really well with the style of the original post headquarters. So that's how it looks today. Here's all the little cottages that have been rebuilt. These are all the original buildings, of course, and then the new ones here, and actually some of them are right here, billeting and this. They're all built, the new ones built in the same style. This is the museum, so it was part of this rebuilding process. We got the building in 2012. I've been there since 2011, so I was the first person that worked in this building. Very proud part of my life. And it houses the collection that was in the museum and the library. So this is a little bit about the collection itself. The library collection goes back to 1912. Louisiana was one of the first states that was allowed to photocopy. Photocopy was a new thing in 1912. This is the photocopying operation here. Government archives for all the Confederate soldiers. So we have all those photocopies and all the information from that project. It produced something called the Booth books. Every library has them, but if you're ever doing any research on Confederate soldiers, it's because of the collection that was put together that we have now hold. This was another thing that General Fleming did with the WPA. He had a group of historians and librarians comb the state of Louisiana for any information regarding Louisiana military history. They transcribed it, they retyped it, they bound it, they index carded it. There's 300 volumes of information, like Google, pre-Google. So if you have an ancestor that served in the military in any capacity in Louisiana, you can come look at our index cards and we can probably find you a spot in one of these books that will talk about what he was doing at that time. I always have this guy in my slideshows because I'm hoping someday somebody will go, hey, I recognize that picture. But this is an oil painting. It's in our collection. It was badly damaged by Katrina. This is the before picture, not a great after picture, but we had it restored. And he's supposed to be Governor Pinchback, the first African-American governor anywhere in the United States. But he doesn't look anything like Pinchback. There are pictures of Pinchback and he does not look like him. So we're kind of wondering if maybe he's not. So we have a few mysteries. This is the establishment of the museum, 1964, General Fleming again. He retired, he went, hey, I think we should have a museum at Jackson Barracks and I'm gonna do it. So he twisted somebody's arm, got some space and started collecting things. So this is his establishing the museum. In the 1970s, it was moved to the Gunpowder magazine. This was built in 1837, way out the backside of the post, and renovated beautifully so that it became the home of museum. And then they just kept adding things onto it over the years. This is the Gunpowder magazine right here. It has an extra wall around the outside in case it blew up when it held gunpowder. St. Claude Avenue is on the right. If you're familiar with this area at all, Claiborne would be over to the left. So this is how it looked prior to Katrina. There was an exhibit space here. This was a big theater. They had conservation space in here. There was, I think, 6 buildings in total that had something to do with the museum. And of course the planes and the tanks and everything around. And then that's what happened. So that guy I said that swam across the post, he stopped and rested on the plane wings for a while and then continued on his dog paddling. But it was 15 feet deep, a little at least. This is the library. It was on the other end of the post, closer to the river, and it had about 4 to 6 feet of water. But again, they lost everything. There's the WPA collection of books on the right. So everything was rescued to the best of that they could, and the paper was frozen. Textiles went to a textile preservation company. It was brought back, was packed. There's the car. Someone was asking me about this 1917 General Pershing's car. So that's how it looked after Katrina and some of the storage room damage. This is the museum today. So they took all the square footage of all those buildings and put it into this one right here. This is the Gunpowder magazine. It's now open space. The chaplain uses it. It's used for weddings and conferences and things like that. There's the museum today. It's a beautiful building. It's got a courtyard. We've got all of our artifacts are back outside. One of the first exhibits we did was the Hurricane Katrina story, because that was, we got it in 2012, we were just unpacking everything. So we recently built this rooftop here. This helicopter did rooftop rescues during the storm, or right after the storm, and it fell through a rooftop. So we depicted that here, and we have it set up now so that you can go underneath the tail and up the ramp and sit inside the helicopter and see a flyover video. Kids really enjoy that, get inside the helicopter. The flags are all the National Guard states that came to help during Hurricane Katrina. They each brought a flag, and they had those hanging at Belle Chase, which was the main headquarters for the post-Katrina response. We've got Global War on Terror story, Desert Storm. This is the Cold War period. We've got a half of a F-4 jet, and you can also sit inside that one. This is our World War II exhibit, Stuart tank. All of our exhibits are built by the staff at the museum. We have a historian who writes the content. We've got a graphic designer who puts together the design on the wall, and we just get it printed at a local printer, and he comes and installs it. It's vinyl. It's basically vinyl wallpaper, but it's all the staff of the museum that put this together. That is our very lovely World War I tank. It actually belongs to the Louisiana State Museum. It was totally underwater during Katrina, and a museum in Texas needed to borrow it to build their own, because they're very rare. There's about 4 in North America. So they borrowed it for a few years and restored it while they were using it as a prototype to make their own. And the General Pershing's card you can just see barely on the right. Small Arms Gallery, we've got about 200 small arms on display. We have a total of 475 in the collection. These again they were all underwater, and they're all being taken apart and derusted and cleaned and oiled. This is our Jackson Barracks history. So a little bit about the story I just told you is on the wall there. Spanish-American War period, Civil War and Reconstruction, that is Resurrection and Redemption. Some of you might know those guns. They've been around in the museum for years and years, and they were used at the Battle of Liberty Place in the post-Civil War period. This is our Battle of New Orleans exhibit. This is our colonial period exhibit. So we cover the whole story of the Louisiana National Guard and the militia prior to the National Guard. This is the most popular exhibit we have. It's a little kid's obstacle course. They climb under the barbed wire and through the tunnel and over the wall, and oh my gosh. And then they can try on helmets and uniforms, and they just love it. We have an education space, we call this, a little classroom space on the left with about 50 people that it holds, and on the right is a conference room that holds 20. These areas are currently free for use, so if your group ever wants to come to the museum and have a meeting there, we would love to host you. And this is our collection storage facility. The only good thing about a hurricane is that you can build a museum to be a museum. So instead of sticking collections in the basement, they were on the second floor, and we have wonderful rolling racks and shelves, everything appropriate. Everything had to be recatalogued. That was my first job when I came to the museum. There's over 10,000 objects in the collection, objects, paper, photographs, digital material now. So it all is is recatalogued. This is our library, so this was the legacy of that 1912 photocopying operation. We have lots of paper files, archives. We have separate archival storage rooms in the back that have different kinds of fire protection. If you're ever doing research or want to know somebody who wants to do research on Louisiana military history, you need to send them to us because we've got some treasures here. This is our volunteer groups, young and old volunteer group. They started in the 1990s, so the 122nd Bomb Squadron and veterans. They wanted to put an airplane up at Jackson Barracks, so they started out with airplanes in the 1990s. And some of these guys have been serving every Wednesday, 3 Wednesdays a month for 22 years. It's pretty impressive. And we've got a young man now who's working with them. They take apart all the guns and put them back together, and they're working on a Jeep there on the right. They keep our running vehicles running. They do small projects, they do big projects. They're always looking for helpers, so if anybody has some time on a Wednesday, you can come hang out and drink coffee and pontificate over how to polish a car or whatever they have. They've got a Jeep engine they need to put back together. They could use a hand, definitely. This is the replacement for the theater space that was there prior to Katrina. It is a big, they call it the multi-use complex. It's across the courtyard from the museum, and it's available for rent for bigger events like galas and huge conferences and weddings and things like that. As is the Gunpowder magazine. Now that's what it looks like on the inside. It's just open space and used for other events. This is where we are at. St. Claude here, and Claiborne up the top, or at the block in between, so the river's down at the bottom. If you Google 6400 St. Claude, our address, it will not get you to us, but if you look up the Jackson Barracks Military Museum, you'll see it and you can get to us. The gate is now open. You don't have to show identification. You can just drive right up. And we're open Tuesday through Friday, 9 to 5, and the last Saturday of the month, 9 to 2. And it's a wonderful day trip. And support our museums. We're in a transition period right now. We're trying to figure out how to do some long-term funding. The funding in the past has, all the exhibits were funded with private donations through the Louisiana National Guard Foundation. And it still supports us today, but those monies are getting low. So we're going to be doing some fundraisers in the future and trying to figure out a way to make the museum long-term, sustainable long-term, because it's been there since 1964. We want to keep it going. So if you can help us out, consider a donation. And I do have a sign-up sheet here if you want to get on our newsletter list. And my cards are here too. If you want to grab one of those, you need to make special arrangements for a tour or a tour of the historic garrison area. We'd be happy to have you all. And yeah, does anybody have questions for me? That's kind of the gist of it.
Does the Pershing vehicle still run?
The Pershing vehicle does not run. It is a static only. We got a replacement vehicle, so we have a black 1919 Cadillac. I think it was in some of those 122nd slides. And we use it for parades, and there it is. They're polishing it right. There it is in the background on the right. That's the black one is a 1919 Cadillac staff car. But Pershing's car, Pershing actually never rode in that car. I tried real hard to prove that he did, because that was the reputation. Everybody calls it Pershing's car. And definitely Pershing rode in cars exactly like that one, but I could not prove that he ever rode in that one. We didn't get it till long after he came to the Jackson Barracks, so, but yeah.
Yeah, I've been visiting that museum for years now, for I guess 40 years or so. It's a great experience. Y'all done a magnificent job elevating it. We had a special tour out there with another group, military group, and it was a great experience, and we had lunch there and everything. So that could be an experience for our American Legion maybe one time. Make that our monthly meeting.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I recommend it because it's a great experience.
It really is, and it's a hidden gem. A lot of people don't know about it, so I'm relying on y'all to spread the word and help us get some more people in the door.
One thing I've noticed about, you talk about Pershing, being here, and then the Buffalo soldiers were here, You know, Pershing was nicknamed Blackjack Pershing. Have y'all ever heard that?
Yeah, I've heard, but I don't know why.
You know how I got the name?
No.
At the Spanish-American War in Cuba, he commanded the Blackjack.
Oh,
The
okay.
Buffalo, small Buffalo.
Maybe it was his guys. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I don't know.
I just wanted to reiterate what I said. We went to the same organization, and it is absolutely fabulous. We are thinking about maybe having a field trip and having lunch over there or something. It's really worth it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
You said you could find any soldier. What about a Union soldier?
I have one book that has Louisiana Union soldiers, so there's maybe,
Because I
definitely.
have a relative who's
Yeah.
a Union soldier.
Yeah. Yeah, if you call ahead and give us, or email, and give me the name, we can kind of pre-check and see, and then you can come out, or we scan things and email things too, so grab my card and give me a name and what you're looking for, and we'll check it out. Yeah.
Yeah, I live in a house in the French Quarter that was commandeered and used as a hospital during the Civil War. I was wondering why they didn't put Union wounded from Fort Hudson and Vicksburg at Jackson Barracks. Rather.
They did. They had several, in fact, I have a sad story. Well, it's sad for me. But there were several hospitals in New Orleans during the Civil War. And I, in the past, thought that there was one, and that it was at Jackson Barracks, and that weird-looking one that I pointed out that was built in the 1840s. And there's a story of a soldier who was at Port Hudson and got sick, dysentery, and it took a month to get that soldier from up there down here by wagon. I can't imagine, it must be horrible. But that soldier died in a hospital in New Orleans and was buried at Jackson Barracks, we believe, and then moved to Chalmette. And the soldier's name is Lyons Wakeman. But Lyons Wakeman wrote a biography, and I gave it away. So Lyons was a man, but Lyons was really Sarah Rosetta Wakeman. She disguised herself as a man and joined the Union Army and served through the whole war and ended up dying in New Orleans. She's buried in Chalmette as Lyons Wakeman, but she left a biography and her family found it in the 1990s that became a book called Uncommon Soldier. And it talks about her dying in New Orleans in the hospital. So I went, wow, she could be the type of soldier that died and was buried in the Post Cemetery on Jackson Barracks, because when we made that cemetery with the Seminole Woman monument, we wanted to include the story of regular soldiers and, enslaved people, and the cemetery held everybody. So that monument is not just for the Seminole Woman. There's 5 markers there, and one is the soldiers who served at Jackson Barracks as well. They established Chalmette in 1866, I think, the National Cemetery there, and they dug everybody up from Jackson Barracks and moved them over there. But of course, they always miss somebody, right? So I wanted to tell the story of Sarah Rosetta Wakeman because that was just such an interesting story. But when I really got down in the weeds of it, she probably died at your house, not at mine, is when it came down to. I did find a record of this hospital that she passed away at and was in Jackson Barracks. But that's how I know there were numerous hospitals. I'm sure they were using every building they could for that purpose.
Thank you very much.
You are welcome. Thank you all for inviting me. It's a pleasure. It's a wonderful life.